She the queen, yeah, that's Queen Esquire. Legal trouble, she getting you out the fire. Another day and she solving another case. Cause she litigate with dignity and grace. She the queen, yeah, that's Queen Esquire. Legal trouble, she getting you out the fire. Another day and she solving another case. Cause she litigate with dignity and grace.
Hey Barbie, Chloe, period I, period 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 got my name up in your mouth, you don't know no better. Don't forget I'm from the south, yeah, I got them headers. You watching everything I do, studying all of my moves. Wish you could do what I do. Period I, period period I, period period I, period period I, period.
Hello, litigators and opinionators. Court is now in session. Hello, Diana. Welcome from Las Vegas. That's a wonderful place to be. Welcome. I know it's probably hot over there now. Well, guys, let's get back into it. We talked earlier today, if you were on my live earlier, that today Bryan Kohberger basically has agreed to enter a plea. He has not yet entered that plea, but the prosecutors, it appears as though, based on the updates that I have seen, they unilaterally made this deal with the defense attorneys, and it appears as though they didn't follow normal proper protocol. Normally, attorneys who are prosecutors, I used to be a prosecutor for many years, and normally when we're going to plea a case out, and if there's a victim involved, we will at least talk to the victim of our plans. Now, the ultimate decision is up to the prosecutor. The prosecutor does not have to listen necessarily to the victim's request for a different sentence. The prosecutor represents the state, and the prosecutor does not represent the actual victims involved. And some people don't really know that, and that's understandable enough. People think that the prosecutor represents the victim involved, but they're actually not the attorney for the victim. They're the attorney for the state. So what that means is they have to do what's the best for the state, what's for the community as it relates to that crime. But normally the proper thing to do, and when I was a criminal prosecutor, before I would make the ultimate decision in terms of the sentence for the defendant, I would at least talk to the victims. But it's now appearing as though the prosecutors didn't even talk to the victims. All they did was mail a letter. Number one, that was impersonal. It's improper, and it's just inconsiderate. This is a quadruple. Actually, no, it was four. They killed four people. He killed four people. Bryan Kohberger murdered four people, guys. Four young adults. And they didn't have the decency to call and ask to set up an appointment with the victims to come down to the prosecutor's office to look these parents face to face and tell them what their plan was and at least hear their concerns. But based on the first video I did today, it looks like all they did was just mail out a letter after they made their own decision. So they decided to make a plea. They decided the sentence that they were going to offer Bryan Kohberger, and then they just mailed a letter to the victims. And so this has caused, in particular, the Goncalves family to be enraged. And I understand why they would be angry, because, they've been the most vocal family involved in this whole tragedy with Bryan Kohberger. They've always been in all the interviews throughout the last 2 years. They're the main family that I have seen that spoke out. I've seen other families speak out, of course, but I feel like the Goncalves family has been the most vocal family of all of the victims, and they are absolutely enraged about the plea deal. So just in case people don't know what case this is, and some people are probably like, what case this is about these four young victims on the screen. They're called the Idaho Four. These young ladies and young men, they were college students at the Idaho. There were sorority girls. This guy was this young man here. He was in a fraternity, and he was in a relationship with Xana. I don't know, it's so hard to say their names. Forgive me if I got her name wrong. But this beautiful soul here, Xana, they were in a relationship. It was so sad. a horrible person named Bryan Kohberger who wanted to aspire to be just like Ted Bundy. That was his aspirations. He wanted to emulate his role model, basically, a weird sicko. And it was weird because his mother is the one that was obsessed with the Ted Bundy case. And she was the one that was objecting to actual Ted Bundy being executed. So he grew up hearing about Ted Bundy. But anyways, his plan is to enter a plea so that he doesn't have to go through the death penalty. He wanted the death penalty to be gone. But what ended up happening is prosecutors handled this case very poorly, inconsiderate, and they lacked any empathy. They don't have to listen. They don't have to actually give the sentence that the victims recommend, but they do need to, in a proper way, at least tell them, give them a heads up and talk to them, have some decency. But it looks like the prosecutors, they made their choice. They were going to take the death penalty off. They were going to give this plea deal to Bryan Kohberger, and they didn't even sit the victims' parents down. They didn't try to set up a meeting with them to talk to them. All they did was write a letter to them to say, hey, we're going to let Bryan Kohberger enter a plea deal, and this is what we're going to give him. And we hope that you'll understand. And when I read that in the first video today, when I read the last sentence, when the prosecutor wrote, I hope you'll understand, that's when I realized that they didn't talk to the victims. That's when I realized that maybe there were some victims involved that were objecting to this plea deal. And Lord and behold, I was right. Goncalves family is not happy with the Kohberger plea, writing on social media, "It's true. We are beyond furious at the state of Idaho. They have failed us. Please give us some time. This was very unexpected. We appreciate all your love and support." So yeah, they're enraged. They have been writing on social media all day. The Goncalves family page on social media says, "It's true. We are beyond furious at the state of Idaho. They failed us. Please give us some time. This was very unexpected. We appreciate all your love and support." They put hashtag heartbroken, hashtag Kaylee Jade forever. That is what they wrote. It's so sad. Oh man, I feel so sad for them. So let's listen to the interview. They actually did an interview with one of my favorite. I love News Nation, y'all. I really love them. I feel like I got to give them kudos because I feel like they were the best news station. Them and Court TV were the best in covering this story. They were just absolutely amazing. So let's hear from Kaylee Goncalves' dad. This is so messed up, man. These prosecutors really failed this family. I know when I was prosecutor, I would at least I would meet up with the victims face to face, talk to them, let them know what our plan is. Because again, the prosecutor does not necessarily have to go with the exact sentence that the victim wants. Again, they represent the state. So if they decide, hey, this is the right route, it could be for many reasons why the prosecutor decided to do this way. Number one, trial is a gamble. You never really know what the end result's going to be. No matter if you have all your evidence and your ducks in a row, you just don't know what's going to end up happening. So trial is a ultimate gamble, and the prosecutors probably didn't want to roll the dice, and they wanted to have a sure certainty that this man was going to be held accountable for what he did. So maybe they just said, you know what, we're going to go ahead and just not roll the dice, and we're going to try to get the family justice in this way. They may have also assessed the value of the quality of their evidence. They may have also assessed the victims, the motions that they would have to go through a full trial and see the evidence that's going to be presented. They may have even assessed the witnesses involved, all of that. And the prosecutor looked at the whole case and said, you know what, it's probably in the interest of the state to just plea this out if they're willing to plea, and we'll maximize the sentence to the highest that we can give this man. But I really feel like the prosecutor should have looked more deep into this. They didn't want to roll the dice, basically. They didn't want to gamble on it. So, yeah, he is very distraught, Christina. It's so sad, y'all. Oh, you said, Diana said it is 104 degrees today. Girl, it's 99 degrees where I'm at. Girl, it's hot over there, 104. Yes, Christina, look at his face. He's emotionally distraught. Let's hear from him.
His attorney is Shannon Gray, who has stood by him steadfast from the beginning. Steve, I don't know what to say. You're the first person I thought of When I heard this news today, I reached out to you right away, first to tell you how sorry I was, because I know how this is landing, at least I think I do. But I wanted you to have your say. I wanted you to be able to say out loud for everyone to hear what this means to you and your family.
This is anything but justice. This is the opposite of our will. There was no majority believing that this was acceptable. I want to honor all the police officers, the FBI, and all the people that work their tail off. The failure is at the court level, 100%. But the men in the boots on the ground and the women that were out there working, I want to honor everything that they did for our children, 100%. The fault is in leadership and the people that you place this evidence upon. They were weak. They decided to play God and decide what this man's decision should be, and not a jury, not a peers, not his peers. They, so that's where we are today.
Walk me through what happened. Bryan Enton, did some really great reporting at the top of this show here, but tell me from your perspective how the last 3 days have played out.
Selling your car to Carvana is easier than you think.
Sorry, guys, that's the advertising. But you guys can already see. Dang, just the first thing out of his mouth, he looks like they knocked the wind out of this poor man's soul, man. He's so heartbroken. And if you guys have followed this story the last 2 years, this family deeply loved their daughter. Like, they were enraged when this first happened and in shock. And they wanted to literally, this dad wanted to get his hands on Bryan Kohberger, and he wanted to literally kill him himself. I'm telling you, if there was no laws against murder, I'm telling you, this father, him right on screen, he would have in that courtroom snatched up Bryan Kohberger and slaughtered him in that courtroom. That's how angry. He literally was burning a hole in that man's head as he looked at him in court. And so I knew from day one, this family wanted him to get the death penalty. They wanted him to suffer the way his daughter suffered. And this is so messed up how the prosecutors didn't handle this right. Like, I feel like they just, and I understand they don't represent the family. I understand, of course, the prosecutor makes the ultimate decision, but they should at least had a little bit of dignity to talk to them and really explain to them why they took this route. What was the evidence involved? What was their deep analysis? Maybe the concupiscences would have been a little bit understanding if they would have just had that opportunity to talk face to face with the prosecutor, but they didn't even care. The prosecutor just made their choice, wrote a letter, and just was like, this is what we're about to do. We hope you'll understand. That's so rude and inconsiderate. And you know how long we've been waiting for this. For 2 years, we've been on this case. And you just gonna just up and just do that to this dad? That's messed up.
Ever since Hitler's demanded an independent investigation, they couldn't get away from this case fast enough. They've done everything to make this case go away. So I don't know what that entails, but he said he was going to have an independent investigator, and all of a sudden we seemed like we were on rails to get rid of this case and make a plea deal. I mean, he's guilty. We all know he's guilty. There's more than enough evidence, but it's tough. It's tough to put a community through this, and it could be bad for reputations and business identities, and there's fallout. But this isn't the will of the victims. This is just one person making a decision, and it doesn't reflect what we were asking for.
Steve, did anybody ever call you from the prosecutor?
Wow. That is very clear to me that none of the victims are in agreement with this. Like, when I did the first part 1 video, y'all, I was under the assumption that they talked to them. But it's looking like they just did their own thing. Dang, that is so absurd, you guys. Like, Dang. I feel for the victims.
Prosecutor's office to just personally discuss this with you? Did anybody offer to meet with you in person to go over this potential plan?
We have meetings all the time particularly a lot of times on Friday. No. We had this regular meeting that we have to try basically do an update of what's going on, where things are at, because Idaho is actually an amazing state where it really does care about people. We just get one or two, people who just don't care about the victims and don't care about justice. And it's easy to take the weight out. It's easy to make an excuse and say, I'm doing this for the victims, even though I've never interviewed the victims. I've never really talked to them to find out what their true feelings are. So here we are. We're stuck, and we can't get out of it. I ask your audience if anybody knows Judge Hippler, reach out to him and ask him to put his foot down and not accept this offer. It doesn't reflect anything in Idaho. This is not justice. We had an outsider come to our community, kill our kids in their sleep while they're getting a college education, doing everything that they should do, and we don't have the courage to hold him accountable. No plea deal. Let's go for this guy. 100%. Let's do it.
I 100% agree with this father. I feel like these Idaho prosecutors are cowards. That's the bottom line. They're cowards, and they're scared that if they go to trial, they may not get a guilty conviction, and so they don't want to roll the dice. They don't want to take the risk. And it's like, I don't know why they're scared, because they have so much evidence. This case is like overwhelmingly, they have enough evidence to prove it beyond a reasonable doubt. Another thing is the prosecutor is purely just lazy. They don't want to take the time. They know this trial is going to be very long and extensive, and it's going to cost a lot of resources to litigate this case. It's going to take several weeks, guys, of litigation and tons of evidence. And the prosecutor is just purely lazy. They don't want to go through it. They're like, you know what? Let's just save some time. We can max this guy out and move on to another case. They haven't wanted to take this case to trial since it landed on their door. They just didn't want to. So they found a way out, basically, because the defense attorney came up and was like, hey, we're ready to plea. They found a way out. And that's just sad that I thought they would have talked to the parents. And it looks like, based on what he's saying here, is that they never even spoke to him. They were having all these meetings about, the status, but they never actually had a meeting about the plea deal. That is just messed up. So they just wrote a letter to them and told them what their decision was. That is just very absurd.
And that's how this family stands.
How old is this girl?
Sorry, guys, another ad. Let's wait till this ad is over and we're back in action.
Steve, I know that, it's no secret your daughter, Kaylee, was so close with Maddie Mogan, best of friends. And I know that you got to know the Mogan family as well. Have you spoken with the Mogan family, and do you know what their reaction is to this plea decision?
We actually just had a meeting with the prosecution and just tore into it and made it clear that we were not in support of this, but we also invited other families into that, and I'll let them speak on their own that were part of that meeting, but we are in no way alone on this. Multiple families believe the same as we do, but I want to honor their abilities to speak independently and as their child. So I don't want to cross that line, but all I will say is there was no majority for this decision at all. And if they're not working for us, they're working against us, guys. I mean, we have to wake up to this. I mean, we have to hold people accountable. Coeur d'Alene just had a shooting where we attacked our firemen. People need to stand up to these monsters and stop freaking bowing down to them and giving them childcare. I mean,
exactly. It's true. I feel like our judicial system in the United States is flawed in so many ways. They're too soft on crime. They're constantly letting these people out, just giving them the easy way out. And that's the reason why we have such high rate of crime and murder and all kinds of heinous crimes in this nation, as opposed to other countries. A lot of other countries that I have visited are more safe than the United States. You can walk down the street and not have to fear that you're going to get shot up in like places in Africa. You might get concerned about getting robbed or something, but you're not going to have to worry about getting shot somewhere. But there's a little bit more safety over there in those other countries because they have harsher penalties than the United States. The United States is always too soft on crime. These prosecutors, a lot of times, they don't want to take it to trial because it's a lot of resources. They don't want to gamble. They don't know if they might lose. They're like, oh, no, I don't want to gamble. What if I lose? This is going to be even worse. So why don't I just take the easy road out and just go ahead and plea them out? And they don't. And it looks like a lot of them don't even take the time to talk to the victims. And a lot of reasons, too, is because these bigger type of cities and locations, they're flooded with crime. They're flooded with cases. They have so many cases, and it's just overwhelming that it pollutes and floods up the courts. And so because of that, and because a lot of these courts are just overworked and over flooded with criminal cases that need to go to trial, it would be literally impossible to litigate every case. It's just, there's no way. So a lot of times the judges, too, will try to encourage them, not necessarily in criminal cases, this more so in civil, but for criminal matters, a lot of times prosecutors will feel pressure to plead these cases out in order to clear and make way for other cases. So, make sure that the court system doesn't get over flooded and they're not capable of trying these cases. Because a lot of times if the defendant does not waive their rights to a speedy trial, then they can actually get their cases dismissed and there's no victim. There's no right. There's no justice for the victims. But in this case, I just feel like the prosecutors wanted a quick way out. They didn't want to go through the full weeks of litigating it. They felt like this is the more efficient way to resolve the case. But I feel like they handled it the wrong way because they've been meeting with this family every so often to talk about the updated status on this case. They actually had in-person meetings. So why, when it comes down to actually closing the case out and pleading it, why would they just now decide to give them an impersonal letter and not even meet with them? And then after the fact, they meet with them after they already made their choice. And now they want to meet with them and when the families are already upset. So this is really, really sad. I feel like at the July 2nd hearing, I don't feel like this is what's going to more than likely happen. They're going to have a chance. The family's going to have a chance to give their statements at the sentencing. So he'll enter his plea, right? They're going to either sentence him there or they'll continue the case out for a sentencing hearing. It'll be one or the other. Either Bryan Kohberger will ask to be sentenced now, or he'll say, I'll go ahead and continue the sentence to another date. If that happens, then that's going to give time for the families to prepare their statements for the court. And I'm pretty sure the families are going to each speak at that hearing. And that's when we really want to broadcast because they're going to each talk about the effects of this case. They're going to speak directly to Bryan Kohberger, how they feel. And they're going to also talk about how they're upset about what the prosecutors have done. Because I feel like the prosecutors have failed these families. And that's a lot of reasons why victims don't trust the court system. They don't trust it because a lot of times these prosecutors, the courts, a lot of times don't take into consideration the victim's feelings, even sometimes the courts. Because basically when a prosecutor decides a sentence but enters into a plea agreement with the defense attorney, the judge does not have to accept that plea. Now, let's say prosecutor and defense attorney talk it out. They decide that he's going to get 15 years in prison to life. Let's just give a hypothetical, right? And then they present it in front of the court and the defendant enters a plea and says, hey, me and the prosecutor made this agreement. I'm only getting 15 years to life, which in this case is not. He's getting 4 consecutive life sentences and additional 10 years for the burglary. But I'm talking about a hypothetical right now. The defendant can enter a plea, right, in front of the court. The court can say, I reject that plea agreement that you and the prosecutor made, and I'm going to enter my own plea. That's why at that time, when the victims give their statements, it carries a lot of weight for the judge. The judge can end up hearing their statements and decide, these victims do make a lot of great points in their statements. I'm going to give the defendant this sentence. They can give a harsher sentence, or they can give them a lesser sentence, whatever they choose. But however, in these cases, most of the time, the courts and the prosecutor, they'll listen to the victims, but they don't really take the victims' concerns into consideration when they make their ultimate decisions. A lot of times victims feel ignored and disregarded, and this stuff, it ends like this in the media. So this is sad. Very, very sad.
Prison is nothing but adult childcare. You get free vision, you get free dental, you get free meals, you get AC, room and board, cable TV, internet access. It's ridiculous what we give our prisoners. Better than what we treat our vets. Our vets coming back from war with missing limbs. This is unacceptable.
Shannon Gray, I'm going to ask you to step in as well. Judge Hippler, Steve just mentioned Judge Hippler in this case. I have to ask you as a matter of law, would Judge Hippler have been fully integrated into this deal plan? Meaning, this is not a surprise to Judge Hippler. Is he going to have to weigh this and then rule from the bench as to whether he'll accept it or not? Or is it a fait accompli by the time they get this far down the road that the judge will accept it?
Well, I think a few weeks ago, Judge Hippler, talked about had there been an offer at all on this case. I think he mentioned it in the courtroom, and maybe that sparked something with the defense and the prosecution. I'm not sure. That being said, with a plea like this, it's with the life sentences and it's agreed upon by the state and the defense. There's small modifications sometimes that they can make to the sentencing regarding, restitution, some other things like that. But if the state presents sufficient facts to the judge or a plea of guilty to the counts, normally judges will accept that and they'll let the defense know.
And that's true if the sentence in the judge's mind fits the crime. Now, in this case, the judge really has no room because the judge can only go lower in the sentence because the prosecutor has basically offered the maximum sentence that they can get other than death, right? The defendant's going to serve 4 consecutive sentences plus the maximum that he can get for burglary. So the judge really has no other, option but to give him a lesser sentence if he decided to, which is the judge is not going to do because there's 4 murders in this case. So then the defendant has a right to enter a plea. No one can tell the defendant, hey, you cannot enter a plea, you're going to trial. No, he can say, I'm waiving my right to a jury trial and I want to enter a plea. So at this point, the judge pretty much is going to give him what the prosecutor offered because that's the maximum that the judge can get, unless the judge was saying, okay, I heard all the statements, I heard the proof of evidence, because the prosecutor will have to read out the proof of evidence. They're going to have to give the factual evidence that supports the plea because this is a serious charge. And when not even just a serious charge, it could be a little misdemeanor. When a defendant enters a plea, if the defendant does not waive his right to a factual reading of the evidence that the prosecutor was going to bring in trial, then the prosecutor will have to present to the judge a small statement of the evidence that was going to be hypothetically presented in trial. They don't have to do a full-fledged hearing. They just basically will read out a small factual pattern to say, if this case were to go to trial, the prosecution was prepared to prove that A, B, C, and D, and then they just read their statement to the judge, and the judge will look at that evidence and say, okay, I find that to be factually sufficient to prove this case, and I will go ahead and accept this plea. At that time, each side's going to give a chance to give their statements to the judge, and the judge will hear from the victims, and then the judge can decide, okay, this sentence is sufficient, or I'm going to give them higher, or I'm going to give them lesser. In this case, because the prosecutor is giving the highest in the land of the crime, besides death, they're getting the maximum sentence. I expect for this judge to accept the plea outright. I just feel like at this point, the prosecutor will give their factual basis for the plea, and then the defense will probably try to argue a reason maybe why the sentence should be less than, which I don't think that's going to be the case because they already agreed to it. So I think at this point, they're just going to have to accept it and just move forward. Maybe the defendant will speak, but this defendant is very weak and antisocial. I don't expect him to say anything. I expect him to enter his plea, and that's it. If he says anything, I'm going to be absolutely shocked. This guy is just very awkward. I don't think he's going to say a word. He's just going to enter his plea, and that's it. We'll probably will never know what happened unless the Dateline or some of those news stations, they will ask for the evidence to be submitted to them from the prosecutors, and they'll present it to us in some type of documentary.
If they're not going to accept that ahead of time. So I would suspect that the plea will go through on Wednesday, and then, they'll set over sentencing for a few weeks. And so the victims can be present to read victims' impact statements, etc. So.
Ever wondered what your home looks like from space? Enter your...
Exactly, guys. That's exactly what I said before you said that. Is exactly what they're going to do. I expect for them to enter the plea just on July 2nd, but they're going to continue it just like this guy just said. I just said that earlier in this live. They're going to continue the sentencing. That's the hearing we want to be at. We want to be at the sentencing hearing, because before the judge issues the sentence, which I believe in this case for sure, the judge is going to accept what the prosecutor said, because basically a judge cannot order a death penalty. A death penalty can only be something agreed upon by a jury. So if they don't go to trial and they don't have a jury trial in the sentencing phase, then the judge cannot order from the bench death penalty. Never. It only can be from a jury. They have to present evidence in front of a jury at the sentencing phase, and it must be by a jury that they issue the death penalty. So because Bryan Kohberger is deciding to enter a plea, the judge is not going to go any lower than what the prosecutor gave, the offer the prosecutor gave, because prosecutor's offering the highest sentence besides death. Basically, he's going to serve his entire living existence in jail, and this is against the victim's desire. Exactly, Mar. That's exactly what's happening. He doesn't want to have the death penalty. He chickened out. He's going to have, just like Goncalves just said, the father of Kaylee, is that he's just going to enjoy his time in jail, free food. He gets to talk to his family, but none of the Idaho 4 get to talk to their family. So it's just, to these families, it's not justice. It seems like a lot of the families are against this plea.
Steve, I covered a case where the defendant was so overwhelmingly guilty according to the evidence, and it was a death penalty case in Arizona, and that jury voted guilty, and they did not vote for death penalty. So that... Bingo, guys. A lot of times juries are hesitant to issue a death penalty. I know exactly the trial she is talking about. She is talking about the Jodi Arias trial. I want you guys to look up Jodi Arias. That woman was insane, right? She was dating some guy. He was a Mormon. He dated her for a while. She started becoming really possessive, and he got tired of her, so he broke up with her. But he was only using her for sexual gratification, right? So when he started dating other girls that were Mormons, he was trying to find a wife. He really was not. He was just using Jodi Arias for sex, and he was just trying to find a wife at the same time. That girl turned around and killed him in the worst way, guys. She stabbed him up over 100 times, slit his throat, shot him in the head, all kinds of stuff. She overkilled that man. The woman was insane. Well, that Arizona case, I really agree that she should have got the death penalty for sure. If anybody needed a death penalty, she should have got it. The jury didn't agree, and they gave her life. And so I think the prosecutor's mindset is, look, we can take this to trial, litigate it for weeks at a time, months at a time. Then we have to have a whole separate sentencing phase trial, which takes another set of weeks, right? This can be 2 or 3 months of this, right? And then the jury can ultimately say, we want him to serve life. So why waste in the prosecutor's mind, they're like, why waste weeks and weeks of trial, put this family and the community through a lot of emotional turmoil, and ultimately the jury
they may not give this man death penalty. The jury is more empathetic. There have been many cases where juries have been opposed to giving the death penalty. There was another case where the man, I don't know if it was in Florida, guys, but there was a kid, or he was in college or high school. I don't know where but he shot up his school, basically. He killed multiple people. I don't know if it was the school or the church. Guys, I don't got my facts straight, but there's a case where this dude shot up a bunch of people. He killed like multiple people, right? And he went through a whole trial in Florida. Don't you know the jury did not give that man death penalty? The entire community was literally enraged because it was like, this man of all people deserves the death penalty. He killed over 7 people he killed. Yeah, I think he killed like 7 people, guys. And even the jury would not give that man death penalty. So this is my thought process. I think the prosecutor, they looked at this and they were like, they're more than likely going to give this man life anyway if we go to trial. They're more than likely not going to give this man the death penalty. Some reason juries are so empathetic. Even though these people kill multiple people, jurors just don't like the death penalty. It's crazy. I mean, they have issued a death penalty for Ted Bundy and other people. But it seems in this day and age, a lot of jurors are reluctant to give the death penalty. I don't know why, but they just are a lot of times. So I feel like the prosecutor's like, why roll the dice? Why go through weeks and weeks of trial? Victims have to suffer, community has to suffer, everybody has to suffer, when ultimately the jury may more than likely not give this guy the death penalty. They may feel sorry for him from some odd reason. He's a college student, he had his doctorate degree, all this stuff. They might feel empathetic for this guy. Now he serves a life sentence anyway. So in the interest of everyone involved, the prosecutor was like, I might as well just give him the maximum I can give him because this saves everybody the emotional turmoil. My thing is, I feel like the prosecutor should have sat the parties down, because I've seen this happen before in other cases where prosecutors sat the victims down, walked them through the evidence, talked to them about, all the pros and cons and what could ultimately happen. And the victims, because they felt like the prosecutors cared about them and listened to them, were understanding about it. They may not have wanted that and they may have wanted the death penalty, but because the prosecutor at least treated them like humans and listened to them and explained to them why they're deciding this, those victims in a lot of cases were understanding, even though they may, wanted the death penalty. So I honestly feel like the prosecutors, I get where they're coming from, but I feel like they didn't handle it right. They should have talked to this father. They should have talked to all of these families and told them before they decided to say, hey, here's a likely chance. We'll give you examples of many cases where jurors are more reluctant. We're rolling the dice. We can go to trial and ultimately this guy's going to get life. And you never know if the judge might not even give him life, because then when they go to trial, it's up to the judge to, if the jury does not give death penalty, then the judge can even chime in and give their own sentence. Or the jury can say, you know what, we don't want the death penalty. So then it goes to the judge and then the judge will decide a sentence. So I feel like prosecutors are like, well, we can give them the max now. We don't have to worry about taking that risk, rolling the dice, waste everybody's time. Everybody got to see all this. Parents got to suffer. They got to see their kids on the screen with, blood everywhere. And you got to hear the details, the gory details from the coroner, and all these the college students got to come and testify. I think the prosecutors were kind of right in terms of, they may not even get the death penalty at trial. It saves everybody just to do the maximum, because if it goes to trial, they're still rolling the dice, because what if the judge doesn't give him life? What if they decide to give him a possibility of parole? You never know. So this actually helps solidify the case that this guy is not going to get out at all. He has to serve a full life. Oh, was it Nicholas Cruz? Yeah, Jody Arias was the psycho girl. He was psycho. Was it Nicholas Cruz from Florida? It might be. Let me see. Was it Nicholas? There was a guy, he shot up his school and everybody was enraged. It was in Florida. Yeah, the Parkland shooter. Oh, you're right. It was him. And he got life. Oh, he killed 17 people? Yeah, Parkland shooter, Nicholas Cruz, formerly sentenced to life in prison for killing 17. Oh, that was the guy, guys. Yeah, he murdered 17. I thought it was only 7. Oh, yes, guys. This is a good example. I remember everybody was enraged about this trial. Everybody around the world. Thank you for telling me the name, guys. I should have read the comment. Let's go over this real quick. This is a good example, guys. This is a good example of what I'm trying to tell you. So a lot of times these jurors are less than likely going to give a death penalty. It has to be some really serious cases, a really serious case. And this is the crazy part. This was a serious case. This was a case, if any case deserved a death penalty, this case did. This guy killed 17 people. And I think this is the one that they had the jury trial, right? Did he have a jury trial? Because it was a case they had a whole jury trial. And then the jury was like, no, we're not giving him the death penalty. We think he should get life. Yeah, it was it was not unanimous. The jury could not unanimously give this guy the death penalty. And that was it requires a unanimous jury verdict before a death sentence may be imposed. But there was a non-unanimous Florida jury that returned a verdict of life without parole for Nicholas Cruz. This guy killed 17 people. If there is not a case, guys, on point, did he shoot up a church? I think he shot up a church. He got 34 consecutive life sentences, and they remained adamant in their desire to pursue a death sentence in 2021 after Cruz pled guilty to 17 counts of murder and 17 counts of attempted murder. The jurors unanimously found that the state had proven aggravating circumstances in each of the 17 counts of murder, but 3 jurors found that the mitigating evidence outweighed the aggravating evidence. The jury foreman, Benjamin Thomas, told CBS Miami that one juror had strongly believed that Cruz should not be sentenced to death because he was mentally ill. They put that little mentally ill stuff, right? This man, guys, he killed 17 people. That, if nobody deserves the death penalty, this was the example where he shot up a church. This was a prime example of where the death penalty should have been imposed. It was like a no-brainer, right? Very simple, no-brainer. The jurors had it easy. They could have just convicted this guy. No, they were opposed to the death penalty. So that is a prime example. I mean, even what the prosecutor could do is they can have him enter a plea and they can still have a jury trial on the sentencing if they wanted to proceed with the death penalty. But in this case, they took the death penalty off the table, which closed the door for that potential jury trial for just the sentencing part of it. But as you can see in this case, a jury, they all couldn't reach agreement on a death penalty after a man brutally murdered 17 people. So how much more do you think a jury is going to give a death penalty for murdering 4? You see what I'm saying? So the prosecutors, they weighed all of this stuff. They looked at the fact that, jurors are more empathetic. They are more reluctant to give the death penalty in these cases. As heinous as it is, you and I would say death penalty outright, right? But no, that's not the case. For a lot of jurors, they're too empathetic. They're too forgiving. Exactly, Gemini. Thank you for bringing this up, love. He said one juror made the difference. Exactly. One juror. It could take one juror who has empathy. And that one juror can ruin everything, y'all. One juror. But this one, they were saying it was 3 jurors who voted to spare Cruz's life. So it actually wasn't one juror in this case. It was actually 3 of them in the Nicholas Cruz case that were opposed to the death penalty. See, they said right here, which 3 jurors voted to spare Cruz's life, concluded a 6-month sentencing trial. Florida law, like that of nearly every death penalty state, guys, requires a unanimous jury verdict. So I've only given you, sorry, I don't even know if you guys saw that. There it is. Sorry, you guys didn't see that. Right here, I'll show you. It says right here where my mouse is, 3 jurors voted right here. They voted to spare Cruz's life. And every state that has a death penalty requires that every juror has to agree to the death penalty. And as I just showed you, just 2 of the many examples, but this to me is the most heinous example that I can give you. 17 were killed and they still did not give the death penalty, they're going to probably do the same thing in this case. So the prosecutor sat down and were like, why are we going to go through all this? And they're likely going to not give him the death penalty. More than likely, they're going to give this guy life. So why not just save everybody the time and let's just give him the maximum he can get, which is what he's ultimately going to get anyway. That's what the jury did. I mean, that's what the prosecutor did, y'all. Okay, I know the family is mad because I feel like the prosecutor didn't handle it the right way. They should have talked to them first. But it is what it is. Y'all let me know what you think. Let's hear a little bit more and then we'll move on.
That defendant, Jodi Arias, sits in a prison in Arizona as we speak, and she had multiple access to appeals. I wonder if there's any solace at all in knowing that this can't happen to him at this point. There can be no appeal. There can be not one squeak from Bryan Kohberger after he accepts that sentence at the end of this month, unlike what happened in Arizona, where there is always a chance the jury does not choose death. Is there any solace in the fact that you will at least have him silenced and there will be no appeals?
Exactly. And before he answers that, exactly, guys, in this case, there's other risk there. I feel like the prosecutor did make the right choice, guys. I just feel like the prosecutor didn't do it the right way. The prosecutor made the right choice because they cut off the opportunity for this defendant to go through the appeal process. And people who can appeal multiple times, this can be decades of them appealing, right? Until they finally reach their maximum limit. Okay, when it's finally just done, you can't pre-appeal anymore. You went to the highest court you could, and that's it. But when a prosecutor takes it to trial for sentencing phase, and let's say the jury gives them the same sentence that the family's mad about, the jury more than likely will give this man life. That's more than likely what they're going to do. It's a gamble. It's like you're in Las Vegas. Where was Diana at? Is Diana in the chat? It's kind of like you're at the casino and you're rolling the dice and you're gambling on this person's sentence. So I feel like the prosecutor made the right choice because here's what's going to happen. Here's what would have happened, right? If they went to trial, the jury would have probably gave this man life and they would have been opposed to the death penalty. So the family would have still been upset. And then here's the worst part about it. After the jury gave this man life, more than likely, right? Because they're going to feel sorry for him. Nobody wants to kill anybody. You know how it is. So then what's going to happen is without this plea, Bryan Kohberger would have to, he would more than likely, because he's going to be bored in prison. So he would have been filing appeal after appeal after appeal after appeal. And the family is going to have to live this nightmare over and over and over and over again. And will have to always go to court and worry about the fact that the court might end up agreeing with Bryan Kohberger and then end up taking this back to the trial court. And now we're back in trial court again. So the family may not see it clearly now, but the prosecutor did the right thing because the prosecutor is going to close this case once and for all. The family can rest and they can get closure and they don't have to worry about going back to court about this man. He's done. He's going to have to stay in prison. It is what it is. So let's see what the family feels about that particular question that she had.
Absolutely zero. None. Could be no farther than how we believe. I want my community support. I want that jury to make the decision, not Thompson, not some old man who's 70 freaking years old deciding how my daughter's life weighs in a courtroom. That is not justice. That is not justice at all. I'll take my juries. I'll take my peers all day long.
See, he's saying that now, but I've seen it many times in court, guys. I've been an attorney for 11 years, and I have seen many victims absolutely mortified at the jury for their decisions. He's saying it now, but I'm telling you, if they were to go to trial, he would still be upset with that jury because many times juries make decisions that families do not like. So I know he's hurt right now, but I'm just saying, I think he would have been hurt either way.
Sick of one man deciding or one woman deciding what a life's worth. So that's how I stand on that.
I fully understand how you feel. And none of us can understand what you're going through. None of us is walking in your shoes. And I'm just glad to give you this platform to be able to say these things publicly. And I'm also glad that you got the support of Shannon Gray, who's just been a rock for you. Thank you to the both of you. Steve, please give Christy and your kids our love.
Okay, y'all, she just gonna give her condolences at this point, so there's nothing left to say. But just look at this dad's face. I feel so sad for him. My heart is absolutely broke. I feel so sad for him because no attorney, this is the hardest part of being a criminal prosecutor. It is. Because you always feel like you never can make the victims happy, no matter what decision you make. Because the family's hurting. They're not thinking about, like, as an attorney, we're looking at it from the legal perspective. We're analyzing it from an objective perspective. So we're more like, okay, what's the law? What is more likely going to happen at trial? We're playing this whole thing out with all the evidence. We're meeting with the other attorneys. And we're thinking about it from, okay, the legal perspective. But there's a whole other side. There's a family who's thinking about it from a humanities perspective, a personal perspective. They lost their loved one. They want the person who did this to their loved one to suffer the same gravity of pain that their child suffered. They know they're never going to be able to talk to their child again. They're never going to be able to see their child walk down the aisle to graduate or get married or have kids. So the way that the parents are digesting this information is never going to be equal to what an attorney's thinking. And a lot of times when we're thinking, we're not thinking from that humanity perspective. We're thinking from, okay, what the law is, what's the risk of going to trial, what's ultimately going to happen. And that is very sad because there's no pleasing the victim. They'll never be able to please the victim. I just feel the way that they handled it was the wrong way. They should have talked to them, sat them down, because either way, this family would have been upset. They would have went to trial. They would have had to suffer. They would have had to see this man go through the whole trial, get convicted, and then hear from the jury that they ultimately decide we're not going to give him the death penalty. We're going to give him life. And they would have been upset. We would be here months down the line, probably in September, October, hearing this same statement from them that they're upset with the jury. They feel the jury was wrong. I understand he's thinking this way now, but I promise you, if this were to go to trial, that would have been the end result. They would have been very disappointed with the jury. And I've seen it happen time and time again with victims. They're upset with the jury. They're upset with the prosecutor. So it's just sad. And I feel like the prosecutor really needs to try to take themselves out of their legal mindset and just think of the victims and at least apologize and show empathy to them and really explain to them from the legal perspective why they made that choice and how it's going to benefit the family in the end, because they get full closure. This is a good thing, though. They get full closure. They don't have to suffer. Like, there's many victims out there. They have to go to court year after year after year because either the defense is going to appeal again and again and again, and these victims have to relive their pain and trauma. They got to go to these appellate court hearings because they want to see what happens to this defendant. They want to know if this guy's going to suffer. So they're going to go to the appeal hearings, right? They got to sit there in the courtroom and keep hearing this evidence and suffer. They never get closure years down the line. So I know he's sad now, but this is a good thing for him. He does not have to worry about this guy again. He'll never realize that because he's going to think a lot about the loss of his daughter, but this is going to help him heal away from the judicial system. Another risk is sometimes these people get parole. And then now you got to worry about going to the parole hearing and trying to continually talk to the parole board to say, no, this person shouldn't get out. So y'all let me know what y'all think. From a legal perspective, I think this is the best thing for the victims because they don't have to ever see this guy again if they don't want to. If they were to go to trial, they would have to keep reliving this over and over again because I promise you, every defendant claims they're innocent when a lot of them are guilty. A lot of them, they just get bored in jail and they just want to go. They want to get out of jail, so they find some reason to go to court. They're like, let me just follow this appeal so I can be out of this jail cell. It gives me a chance to go somewhere else. So they'll keep appealing and appealing and appealing and appealing, wasting judicial resources for nothing. But what do y'all think? Okay, so Gemini says then he would sue regarding a civil rights violation regarding the method of fulfilling the sentence. It would go on and on. Exactly, Gemini. This thing would go on and on and on. Look what happened in the Chris Watts case. I don't know if you guys know about the Chris Watts case. He killed his wife and his children. That man entered a plea and he waived his right to appeal. Don't you know, we ain't never heard from him again. We do hear from him every now and then with his little semantics talking about why he killed her or whatever. But the family never has to worry about this guy going into the court system. So like Jim and I said, they're gonna keep finding a way to be out of that jail. They're gonna find a way to appeal. Like he said, file a civil rights violation. He's gonna try to sue his defense attorney and say she was not competent, and you just gonna keep going. So I'm hearing you, Gemini. I think this was the right thing for them. I'm so sorry that the family is hurt. It's understandable that they're hurt. It's their family, and they're not looking at it from the legal objective mindset. But I feel this is going to help everybody. But I'm telling y'all, let me let you know right now, when they have that sentencing hearing, it's going to be a drama show. Them families are going to go off on that prosecutor. Not in a way where they're going to be like, you did it. They're just going to say, we feel totally disrespected. We feel totally that we were not heard by the prosecutor. This was not our desire. Our desire was to see this go to trial, blah, 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 blah. They're going to be very upset at the sentencing. So we want to be there for that because it's going to be something we get a chance to hear from them and how they feel. All right, guys, like, comment, and subscribe. I would like to hear your opinion, though. Do you think the prosecutors got it right? Do you disagree with them? What do you think they should have did? Do you think they should have took this to trial? What is your opinion? And what do you think about how they handled it with the families involved? Let me know. Like, comment, and subscribe.